And welcome back to another edition of Politically Unfiltered. I'm Arno Betts, your host. Glad you could make it. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time you're tuning in. I'm glad you tuned in. Okay, today I want to talk not so much about what's in the news. I want to talk about the people that bring us the news. And this pretty much goes for both sides. You have a left-wing media and you have a right-wing media. We all know this. And how do I put this? It all started for me when I started listening to Rush Limbaugh. And it would have been in the mid to late 90s when I started listening to him. And I'd been listening to him for, I don't know, maybe a year, maybe. And the whole time that I was listening to him at that time, and it was probably 1996, 1997, somewhere in that area, and I would listen to him, but I wasn't really listening to him. The reason that I had him on most of the time was, you know how if you are in a vehicle for a long time and you have the radio on and you're listening to the radio, there was a time whenever you turned on the radio, 99 and 44, 100% of the time, you would either hear a quick little news break and they'd tell you what was going on, and then they'd get right back into playing either classic rock music or country music or whatever your choice was of music, and you'd listen to music. TV was for watching, radio was for listening to music. And because the job that I had at the time, I was selling seafood out of a truck sitting alongside a road waiting for customers to come in to buy seafood. And of course, when you're in a vehicle, you don't have, at that time, back in the 90s, you didn't have a TV. I suppose you could if you wanted to, buy a 12-volt TV and have it in there with you, but it was just as easy just to listen to the radio all day. And you'd listen to music all day, and if you've spent any time listening to music, there's nothing wrong with listening to radio, but radio is no different than anything else. After a while, they get playing the same songs in rotation, and you hear the same music all day long. So you upgrade and you get yourself a radio that can play cassette tapes. At first, you can listen to all of your own recorded music. But then after a while, that begins to become the same thing. You're hearing the same thing over and over. Well, all of a sudden, this Rush Limbaugh guy comes along, and he's got this radio program. So if you want to get away from the music that you're listening to, whether it be on a radio station or on a cassette or then CDs and stuff like that, well, now you can listen to Rush Limbaugh talk about politics, right? And I didn't mind listening, but it was more, I would turn it on and just let him talk and kind of fill the air with sound, and it wasn't this same music over and over and over again. It was just someone talking and giving their opinion about politics, and that was fine, no big deal. And I did this for quite a while. Anytime I got tired of listening to music, I'd switch over and just listen to Rush. Not that I thought anything he said was right, wrong, or indifferent. The only thing I did know was he was a Republican, and at the time I was a hardcore Democrat. And I would I'll listen to him, and let's just hear what the other side has to say. But in the back of my head, it was like, reject everything he says. Just reject it because he's Republican, and the way I was brought up and the home that I was brought up in, you just don't take what Republicans say as good, serious, relevant. Anything that's serious, relevant, and important comes from the Democrat side only. That's how I felt at the time. So when I had Rush on, like I said, I was listening to him, but I wasn't really listening. And then I remember this one day, okay, it got into the 2000s, 2001, 2002, and it's the same situation. I'd been tired of listening to to classic rock and country music and whatever. So I switch over to Rush and I'm listening to him. And then all of a sudden he's talking about Dan Rather in 60 Minutes. And at the time, can't remember the exact year, but I think it was 2003, 2004. And George Bush was running for his second term. And I remember Rush is talking about how great George Bush was, and I remember thinking to myself when the show began, I was like, well, of course, Rush, he's a Republican, so he's going to make George H.W. Bush, basically God, because that's how these Republicans are. That's how I thought at the time, and believed it. Boy, I mean, to the core, too, to the core. And I always felt that everything Rush was saying, someone was paying him to say them things. It's a radio show. It's no different than any other show. So he's just saying things that people are paying him to say, and he can say it in a way that draws a big audience, and therefore they can make good money. And that's what I truly believed until this particular day. And he gets talking about Dan Rather and how Dan Rather and George H.W. Bush were both from Texas. And they knew each other, and they'd known each other for a long time. And if you're old enough to remember, you probably remember that George H.W. Bush and Dan Rather had gotten into an argument right on live TV. And George H.W. Bush had agreed to do the interview, but he said, we've got to do it live, because if we do it taped, you're just going to cut the tape up and take things that I say and take it out of context. But if we do it live, at least I've got a chance to say what I got to say, and you can't hack it up or put spin on it or anything, and the people will have, your audience, some of them will have an opportunity to see what I really have to say. And right in the middle of it, of course, Dan Rather went after Bush, and I didn't see it. I never watched it. I wasn't into politics. I wasn't paying attention at the time. But boy, oh boy, it turned out to be quite the something on the Rush Limbaugh show many years after it had happened. And like I said, I think that happened back in 1988 when George H.W. Bush was running for president right after Ronald Reagan had got done. And that's why Rather and Bush had that interview. So fast forward to 2003, and Dan Rather is now on 60 Minutes, and I guess he had been for a few years, and him and this producer were putting out a story about the Air National Guard, and George H.W. Bush's son, George W. Bush, was running for his second term. He already run and won in the first term, and that was a big controversy too. And I never paid attention to any of it when it was happening. I didn't care. I was like, he's a Republican and they're going to cheat and he's going to win anyways. And I remember when I heard he won, that's what I thought. Yeah, they cheated. They pulled strings. They spent money, and that's why George W. Bush won. So here I am, sitting here listening to Rush, half listening, and all of a sudden I'm listening to what he's saying about this whole thing, and he's going through the whole history of it, and he laid it out pretty good. And then at this point, Dan Rather and this producer had put a story out about Dan Rather and this Air National Guard. And again, I don't remember the details, but it had something to do with, because George W. Bush was George H.W. Bush's son and came from the Bush dynasty down there in Texas, when he was in the Air National Guard, he was given special treatment. And that's kind of what the focus of this story was on 60 Minutes about George W. Bush, who was running for re-election. And Dan Rather did the story in a way that it was basically a hit piece on George W. Bush, because he didn't want Bush to win the election. And if I'm remembering right, I think he went against John Kerry. So Dan Rather was trying to help John Kerry win the election by doing this hit piece on George W. Bush. And at the time that it is actually happening, I remember Rush Limbaugh saying, when the show first started, because he would come on at noontime and you'd hear that song there by the Pretenders, Ohio, I think the name of it is. He was able to use just a little snippet of that song, and the minute you heard it, you knew Rush was coming on. And he opened his show talking about how down there in New York, where he was at the time, I think he was still in New York in 2004, and he was saying, well, the big buzz all over New York here this morning is Dan Rather and that producer that put that show on Sunday night. This was a Monday, and normally I would have Mondays off, but for some reason I was on the road that day, and I was able to listen to the show and listen to what Rush had to say about what had resulted from that hit piece on 60 Minutes the night before. And he's basically explaining all that history that I just talked about. And now Dan Rather did this hit piece, and because Dan Rather had underestimated the power of the internet was still kind of new. Even though it had been around, not everybody had it. But every day, more and more people were getting logged onto the internet. And then when you were able to get on the internet, you could bypass the mainstream media. You could bypass Dan Rather, 60 Minutes, CBS, NBC, ABC News, and you could get the truth of what was really going on. And I'm sitting here listening to Rush kind of explain this all, and I'm thinking to myself, that does make sense. That really does make sense. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to have to pause this video for a minute because I'm going to the dump, and I am here at the dump. I got to get rid of my garbage, and then when I get done, I'll come back in and finish what I have to say, so I'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. Sorry about that little interruption there. So, I'm listening to Rush explain how the mainstream media basically in the tank for left-wingers, Democrats, and far-left Democrats, independent Democrats, all the Democrats. That's who they're in the tank for. They've never liked right-wing politicians, and they've always used the divide that they create to influence a lot of people when elections come around to vote for Democrats. And that's how they've used the media. The media has practically been left-wing forever. I mean, if you check your history books, you go back and look at media, do a research on media, and you'll see, here's a perfect example of how long they've been doing this. Abraham Lincoln wanted to get rid of slavery, and the Democrats wanted to keep it. Look at the media and what they said about Abraham Lincoln when Lincoln was president. They basically were saying that, he was the worst thing, the most horrible thing since the devil himself, and, that they were pushing the narrative that getting rid of slavery. What kind of damn fool would think something like that or want something like that? That doesn't make any sense at all. And, gee whiz, and all of the media back then was anti-Lincoln. And it got so bad at one point that Lincoln had to use, there was something they called it, and I can't remember the name of it, but he used this power, and he was able to shut down certain newspapers. And I will say that may have gone against the Constitution, but at the same time, by him doing that, it helped get rid of slavery. So even though it was a wrong thing that I guess he did, if I'm understanding it right, it was for a right purpose, to get rid of slavery and end it. It was a awful, horrible, terrible thing. I mean, and the Democrats wanted to keep it, and the media tried to help them back there destroy Abraham Lincoln so he couldn't stop slavery. So that gives you an idea of how long that this media has been in the tank for left wing. And this is what Rush Limbaugh was explaining. And I'm sitting here and I'm listening to him, and I'm starting to get what he's saying, and I'm getting the point that he's saying. But half of me that was still 90% in the Democrat tank at the time, I'm like, he's lying. He this ain't the truth, and this is just a bunch of BS from the word go. And again, this Rush Limbaugh is good at telling stories, and he can tell them very convincing, but I think he's lying. I think he is lying through his ass. Well, from that moment on, even though I had my doubts about Rush Limbaugh, as time went on, to make a long story short, he really got me to open my eyes that day, and I'm glad that he did. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that everything that Rush Limbaugh ever said and did was right and wonderful and great and blessed by God himself. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is Rush did not lie about the media and the tricks that they use and the things that they do to influence people with the way that they vote. It's as simple as that. They use their power, and that power that the television set has over people is unbelievable when you begin to realize what strength that television screen has over a lot of people. And I think it's mostly people that are around my age. I just turned 60 this past December. I'll be 61 in December. And people that are around my age, 50, 60, and on up, we're the ones that got so super influenced by it because we didn't have the internet when we grew up. We didn't have nothing but the mainstream media. And when the mainstream media was doing this liberal bias to us all, when that's all you ever knew and all you ever saw, of course that's all you're ever going to believe. And if they came on the TV screen and told you, well, the sky is going to turn purple today, you'd believe it. And the sky wouldn't turn purple, so you would say, well, I guess they just must have made a mistake, that's all, no big deal. So, you would just brush it off. But now that we have the internet, all you got to do is just a small amount of research, and 99% of the time, especially when it comes to Donald Trump, when they're telling you that something he did or said, 99% of the time you can find where they're misleading you, because they've either taken something that he said and twisted it, or put spin on it, or neglected to tell you the full context of what he said to influence your thoughts and your beliefs of him and what he says and what he does. They do this every day. They do it every single day. I could sit here for the next 3 hours, I bet, and say, well, there was this time they did this, and there was this time the media did that, and there was this time the media did this, and that, and that, and this, and blah, blah, blah. But I'm not going to bore you with it. Just, you got the internet right in front of you, and it doesn't take long to do the research to find out exactly what they do. Hang on here, I got to get turned around. I got to go back to the post office. Yeah. And that's what my whole point of this video is, that I want everybody out there to know that I'm not sitting here advocating that the Republicans are the greatest thing in the world, and I'm definitely not saying that the Democrats are the greatest thing in the world. But whatever opinion that you come to, my advice is look to independent media on the internet. And a lot of them you can't trust either. But you can get different points of view. Don't base your point of view only on what you see on ABC, NBC, CBS, because 9 times out of 10, you're being misled. Now, you may hear what they're saying on CBS, ABC, NBC. You might be hearing it as clear as a bell. And you could probably recite it word for word. But that doesn't mean that you've been given the correct information. So, again, I got to run at the post office. Hang on. Okay, there, we're back on the road again. Saturday morning, running around doing my errands. Now I'm headed back home, and when I get there, I'm going to have to mow my lawn. I've got this fairly good-sized lawn, and thank God my girlfriend's sister's husband gave me a riding lawnmower 2 years ago, I think it is now. And boy, oh boy, at my age, don't that riding lawnmower make that job a hell of a lot easier. There's a couple of spots I got to do with the push mower, but the rest of it I can do with my rider. Get it done. Takes a few hours, but that's all right. But anyways, back to that mainstream media stuff I was talking about. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I try to tell people all about this that's willing to listen. And I hope that's what you get from this video. It's very important that everybody, you deserve the truth. We all deserve the truth. And I can't sit here and tell you, well, if you go to this right here, you will always find the truth. It's not going to happen. It's not, even I think in the independent media, it's not going to happen. But the one thing I will say is, as much as the mainstream media has lied and continues to tell lies, one thing's for sure, you're just not going to find the truth there at all. In the independent media, again, I can't sit here and say, I know you're going to get the truth. I can't say that. But what I can say is, I know that you're going to at least get the other half of the story. And to make my point more clear, imagine if you get hauled into court, and let's say you're accused of doing something. You come up with anything you want. You're accused of robbery, fraud, burglary, murder, whatever you want. You're being accused of something, but you didn't really do it. But there are people that suspect that you did. So then they decide, we're going to go after you, and we're going to get you, and we're going to throw you in jail. Now, imagine that whatever powers that be they have, they're able to arrest you and put you in jail. And the whole time you're saying, look, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I didn't do it. This is wrong, you got the wrong guy, I didn't do it. And you know in your heart and soul you didn't do it. You have people that know that are willing to testify and say, look, no, he's my friend and he did not do that. Okay? Imagine that situation. Then all of a sudden, the day comes, now it's time for you to go to court. And you've got your friends that are willing to come in to testify in your behalf to prove your innocence. And you believe in a justice system. This justice system is going to prove that I'm not guilty of what they're saying. You have a top-notch attorney. Let's say you got plenty of money and you paid for a top-notch attorney. The day comes, okay. You're going to come into this courtroom and we're going to listen to your case. But the only problem is You get in there and you sit down and you're sitting there with your attorney, and there's a room full of people, news reporters and family members and friends, and then that's on one side. And on the other side, there's all the people that don't like you and they think you did do this and they want to see you guilty and convicted and thrown into jail and throw away the key. The court proceedings start and the judge comes out and everybody stands up and everybody may be seated. Everybody sits down and the judge says, well, okay, we're here to hear this case against Mr. So-and-so here, and this is the charge. He's being accused of murder, burglary, fraud, whatever it is that you chose. And then, all of a sudden, the judge says, okay, today's court proceedings are going to go just like this. The defense will say nothing. The accused will say nothing. But we'll listen to the prosecuting side only. We're only going to listen to their side. This side is going to remain totally silent. So the prosecution gets up and says, yeah, he did it. And here's this and here's that. And it's all a bunch of made up evidence that you can't dispute because you're told to shut up. You and your attorney and your witnesses. Now, I know this is it would never happen, but just imagine if it did. How would you, a person that knew that they were innocent, couldn't defend themselves, the attorney you hired couldn't defend you, the friends you had come into that courtroom to say, hey, he didn't do it, I was with him, or whatever the situation was. Just imagine that happening. And only the prosecution being able to say, yeah, well, he said this and he did that. And the next thing you know, the judge says, yeah, well, okay. Well, it sounds to me like guilty. And if there's a jury there and they don't hear your side, all they hear is the prosecution side, the jury is going to say, you're guilty. You are guilty. And now the judge will use this power to sentence you on such and such a date. So you come back on that date, and sure enough, you're locked up, thrown in jail, and you are labeled and branded either a murderer or a robber or a burglar or a whatever, because you couldn't defend yourself. You were silenced. You were suppressed. This is exactly what a lot of people in the media, and it's on both sides. It's on both sides. It isn't on just one side. It's on both sides. But this happens, in my opinion, way more on the left side than on the right. And that's why I say, if you stand any chance at all of getting information that's even near the truth, I would recommend right now, the only place that I can find it is in the independent media. Now, there's no guarantees in that either, but at least you're in that situation where, okay, you can listen to what CBS, NBC, ABC, CBS, what they have to say, but at the same time, you can listen to the other side and hear what they have to say, and you can be that judge, and you can make the determination of listening to both sides, even if both sides aren't being totally and completely honest. At least you're hearing the two sides. You're not just focusing on what the left wing says, and you're not just focusing on what the right wing says. But I think by listening to both of them, you can get a general idea of what the situation is. And by listening to their sides and what each one has to say, it can help you make a better analysis to help you form your opinion and your decision on how you may vote. Perfect example of what's going on here that's got things really screwed up. Graham Platner. Now, I don't even know the guy from a hole in the wall. All I know is what I've seen in the media. And it's him saying the things that he's saying. they've got him on video making statements that, I know one thing, if I was a politician, I wouldn't be making them, okay? And the left wing, right wing has not influenced me one way or another. If you and I met and you said the same things that Graham Platner is saying, and I've got no idea whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, moderate, I got no idea. I can tell you right now, I wouldn't have to know what your politics are. I wouldn't have to. If you're saying the things that that guy is saying, I just couldn't support you. I couldn't. And I wouldn't even have to know what your political affiliation is. If you're saying things like that, I can't support you. I can't. I just can't. And then if there are women coming out of the woodwork saying that you didn't treat them that well, these are things that I would have to take into consideration. And it's things that he's saying that it's not admitting to anything, but it sure as hell isn't helping his case when he tries to defend himself by saying the wrong things that he keeps saying. This is my whole point about the media. Now, the right wing, they're going to chew him up and spit him out like bubblegum anyways, because we all want Sue Collins to win. And the more this guy does what he does, the more he's helping our side. But what's crazy is in the left-wing media, something that they were telling us to do just a few years ago, you have got to believe the women. You've got to believe the women. But now, because he's being accused by women of doing things that he shouldn't have done, now all of a sudden that very same media that was telling us you've got to believe women, now they're basically saying, well, we got to believe Platner. They're saying the exact opposite of what they said just a few years ago. This is what I mean about this media. All I'm trying to say, and the point that I'm trying to make is, what we really need to do is we got to think for ourselves and stop letting this media have us think one way or another. You got to learn and decide, just like me. Me too. I have to take my own advice. A lot of times I get caught up and wrapped up in what the media is saying and how they make things. I'm as guilty as anyone, but I'm trying not to, and I'm trying to be as fair as I can. But again, I can use Graham Platner because he's the most recent case that I've seen where the mainstream media and the left wing, a few years ago, it was with Justice Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. He was being accused of, back in college, I guess, or school, or wherever the hell it was, of being out of line with a woman. And this woman come forward and said, yeah, he did this to me, he did this to me. And there was no proof. And of course, he was denying it. So here you are. You got a story in this mainstream media. And Kavanaugh was a right-wing Supreme Court judge. So the media is going to dislike him. So what do? They find a woman that's accusing him of something that there was never any proof. They had no proof. It was just her saying so. And because she simply said so, the left-wing media and everybody that buys into their reporting convicted him. He was guilty. He was a rapist. He was a this and that. And a lot of them, I bet you to this very day, still believe that he actually did it. I wasn't there. I can't tell you. I can't tell you whether he did or didn't. All I do know is in the right-wing media, there was a lot of information brought out about the woman who was accusing him. And the mainstream media didn't pay attention to any of it. They didn't report any of it. Or if they did, they would report it in a way like, yeah, well, that's what that side is saying, and we don't believe it. But Justice Kavanaugh is still, an awful, horrible human being, and we cannot let him get on that gourd. Well, Kavanaugh wound up being put on the court because of Sue Collins. Now, that was one of the situations right there where now I'm going to cast a vote for Sue Collins because she knew enough not to listen to that left-wing media and all of the awful that had no proof behind it. She used her head and she's like, I didn't see any proof of this. And yes, I agree that women should be listened to. And we listened to this woman and what she had to say, but she didn't have nothing that proved it, that backed it up. So therefore, that tends me to believe that Kavanaugh may not have done what he's being accused of, and therefore I'm going to vote for him, and he can become a Supreme Court judge. And of course, the left, they come all unglued. Okay, now, fast forward to now. The media that was telling us back then, oh, you got to believe a woman. Whether she's telling the truth or lying, it doesn't matter. You need to listen to her. Well, now, the same thing is happening to this Graham Platner. And what do you think the media is saying? You got to believe Platner. Why? Because he's a Democrat. He's clearly in the tank, and there's all the proof you need that whether he did or didn't do anything, that's a whole other conversation. The point I'm making is exactly what this video is all about. And that I know, I can see, my Lord, I'm up to 38 minutes, is that? 38 or 36? I ain't got my glasses on, I can't see. Doesn't matter. The point that I'm making is the most important thing. The media changes their rules when it's one of their own. When it's someone on the right that has a woman accusing them, believe the woman, convict the right-winger. But if the same situation happens on the left, no, you believe the left-winger and ignore the woman making the accusations. I know. I've been seeing this for 20... I started, like I said, it all started with that Rush Limbaugh I was telling you earlier in this video. That's when it all started for me. My Lord, my Lord, my Lord. Well, anyways, I'm going to end this video here, my Lord. It's 37 minutes, so it must have been 36. I'm at 37 and a half minutes. I've gone way longer, but I tell you, on this, I could talk all day. Please like and share, subscribe to my channel. Let's have a conversation. We can have one in the comments. Tell me what you think, how you feel, you know. I mean, we're Americans. That's what America is all about. Freedom of speech. Say what's on your mind. I want to hear what you got to say, and I hope you want to hear what I say. And you don't have to agree with me, and you can tell me you disagree. That doesn't mean we're going to be enemies. We can still be friends. Come on now. All right, you guys have a good Saturday. Happy Saturday, January 20th to you. You have a good weekend. We're going. Bye.